Well, good morning, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to kick off our Insight 2026 webinar with you. And it is really great that you guys have taken the time out to learn about some insights that we've taken from last year and that we've seen into next year. Today, we have a fantastic panel of thought leaders and futurist thinking that have taken the time to both write papers for our report, but also to lend their time today to have some discussions around our trends that are going into next year. So we're very excited to be able to unpack everything. We have an MC that's going to be joining us to be able to take us through things. So I'm a little left off the hook this year, which is also fantastic. But I do want to just give you a bit of a heads up. A lot of people are new to Livestorm as a web platform. So just to give you a bit of a run around of the tool a little bit. There's a chat system, and we do have people on our team that will be keeping an eye on that chat system. So if you have questions throughout the report that you'd like to throw there, we will be answering those questions as best we can, especially if they're about the insight. We can share some information with you and the report that we've got. If you've got questions for the panelists that you would like answered near the end of the session, send them through to us. We'll collate those and get them ready for 20 for the Q&A near the end. And then, so that's the chat system. There's also a really cool tool because these sessions can often be a little one-sided between the panelists and the audience. There's a really cool tool to be able to drop emojis into the session and to drop likes and hearts and all the rest of it, just to kind of make the rest of us on the front of this platform aware that there are people and that they exist and that they are at least enjoying the content or with the content that we're doing. So really great way to kind of stay connected with what we're doing. So please feel free to hit those buttons as much as you can, just to encore what you're hearing. They help us as speakers to know what the hang is going on. I'm just got a small technical issue, so I'm just making sure that 20's back. Yes, she is. 20's, yeah. There we go. So now we've got a few of those technical things out of the way. I do want to introduce to you Tuweni, who has graciously said that she will make it through to the event today. She's out in Africa. I'll let her introduce herself and where she's from. But it really is a pleasure to be able to introduce her and to. Sorry. Apologies on my audio. My iPhone keeps wanting to hijack me. So, but yeah, thanks so much, Tuweni. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on board, and we hope that you enjoy the session. And thanks for taking the chance to MC this session and facilitate us. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Greetings from Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. That's where I am at the moment. It's a great pleasure and a joy to be able to moderate this conversation with an amazing group of people. Reading all your credentials, dear panel, was a little bit eye-watering, made me feel like, wow, okay, there's work to be done. But it's very exciting because I think this is an exciting season in all of our profession, whether in marketing. It says here that people cannot see me on the camera. I see that. I've gone off, I'm back. Can you see me now? Yay, fantastic. Greetings again. Yeah, so thanks very much, Mike, CEO of Digitlab. We're also joined, of course, by Bronwyn Williams. Welcome, Bronwyn. She's a futurist, trend analyst, economist, consultant, global keynote speaker at Flux Trends, basically the brains pulling this wagon. It's very exciting to meet you, Bronwyn. Looking forward to your insights. Jean-Pierre Murray-Kline, future thinker, business and environmental technologist, is a published author, currently in the throes of writing another book. I think I remember you saying, Jean-Pierre, very exciting. Tiffany Markman, award-winning copywriter, writing trainer, and keynote speaker. I started my career as a copywriter. Clearly, I didn't do very well, so I snapped off to go and do other things. So fantastic to meet you as well, Tiffany. Andrew Gillett, commercial director, and Jochen Bischoff. And he said if I butcher his name, I can just say JB, so that it works out. He's the head of global business solutions for Africa for TikTok. So really an amazing lineup of thinkers to help us make sense of the Insights 2026 report that Mike is going to present. And thereafter, we'll have that chat. So Mike, back over to you.
Thanks so much, Tweni. Guys, we've spent a good part of this year putting this research together, and we are really excited to present it. This year we decided we wanted to raise the bar a bit, and so what we did is we took some time out to and we brought a few extra people into the team. So a few things that we did differently this year is we worked really hard to get a lot more people in from a survey perspective. So we've got sort of close to 400 businesses that have taken part in the research, which what the next question was for us is that could we sort of third party and get a third view on the stats that we were putting in together. So we brought in a third party statistician to run the numbers for us and to make sure that everything we were saying and doing could be statistically validated. And so everything that we are presenting here is not a whim or a whiff or anything. It's all backed by statistical data. And so that's something that we're really excited about. And what that does is it gives us some confidence to really kind of like lay some foundations in the work that we're doing and to give some gravitas to the conversations that we start today. And so there's some really nice insight, some new insight that we think we can put on the table and some new ideas. And so we're hoping that that you'll see and feel the same things. So just to jump into just a few things, we obviously don't have the time to get to everything. So please take the time to download the report itself. There's a lot of value there. There's also papers from all of our contributors who have been a part of this to give you some insight into next year as well. So the report itself has a lot more value than today's webinar can even hope to achieve, even though today will be something else to behold. So let me dive into this as we go. So the first thing is not massive. It's not this like mind-blowing new insight, but it is something that we can echo and we can say. And I think a lot of people are questioning whether social media is still a thing. Social media still is the beating heart of digital marketing. And maybe just kind of echo that at this point, the whole way in which we do our research is we ask about return on investment from businesses. So we're not asking people to tell us what the next trends are, what they feel like, what they think, and we're not chasing down the next sexy thing. We're looking for what actually really works. And so social media still sits as the beating heart. When you ask people what channels they work with across everything, social media comes up over and over and over again. The average business will sit on an average of about 7.9 social media platforms. Knowing what that effort that takes is quite something. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram come up as the primary ones that everybody sits on. TikTok and YouTube sit very much at the next ones, but sort of vacillate between the different types of businesses, and we'll get into that a bit later. And what's really interesting is that when you look at these channels again, is that if you were to categorize them, organizations tend to prioritize direct communications and web visibility over things like advertising and brand exposure. And you could put this down to things like just priority over the information that we have and that we can hold, or the types of communication that we understand and what we know how to do, because we know how to build a website. We know that we understand what a website would bring, etc. But we don't necessarily understand brand exposure as an everyday business. And so this could come down to understanding, or it could also come down to budgets. And so we can unpack this more and more as we go. But when you look across all of these different businesses, this is what becomes interesting. What we then wanted to do is start to understand how this differentiates across different business types. So we were able to segment this across e-commerce, B2B, and in-store. So B2B, we nicknamed the professional core. This segment's definitely prioritizing platforms that help build trust and authority and help generate relationships. So LinkedIn, way up high there with 87%. And just so people understand, this number's been steadily growing. So it's always been one of the biggest platforms that B2B has engaged with. but the engagement level has been growing steadily by 10% a year. So people are really pushing into it. It's becoming almost a redundant sort of social media space that it's almost expected that you're there. Facebook stays there. I know that when we work with people, a lot of people kind of go, oh, Facebook isn't a B2B space, but I think it becomes that default, either used in recruitment or it's used as a space to kind of engage with the audiences because they have a broad audience space. YouTube was interesting, sitting up there way above all of the other channels, and WhatsApp almost at the same level as YouTube as well. And WhatsApp's an interesting one in South Africa because it's so unique in the way in which we engage WhatsApp in comparison to kind of global audiences. So the transformation is very gradual at the moment, but visual platforms like Instagram and TikTok are gaining traction in B2B industries. So Instagram at 77% and TikTok at 55%. We're definitely seeing the shift towards more human-centric communication taking place here. So we jump into in-store. We nickname these guys the social performers. So these brands are definitely more expressive digital marketers. They turn to social media for this. They turn it into like a stage for connection, culture, and commerce. Instagram's right up there. Facebook's right up there. And WhatsApp is right up there from especially direct marketing opportunity. It's just a really fantastic channel. YouTube, TikTok, really like interesting to see how TikTok's pretty much on par with that YouTube channel now, and it's a given. And Pinterest starting to make its way, and I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that Pinterest about 2 or 3 years ago sort of opened up in South Africa and is starting to work with brands, and so it's becoming a bit more accessible to some of the bigger brands that are working inside this space. It's also got a really strong e-commerce engagement plan, and it's very kind of what's the word? Conversion optimization orientated. So there's some interesting tool sets that are coming into place, and people are starting to experiment into Pinterest a lot more. We know the audience is there, but the metrics and the mechanics haven't really been there. Also to kind of point out that TikTok, like LinkedIn for B2B, TikTok has been steadily growing and growing and growing from a business engagement opportunity when you look at both in-store and pretty much across all the networks. And so it's really interesting to see how that works. And then e-commerce. So these guys are a hybrid between the two. They sort of jump in between these two things. They're fluent in storytelling as well as measurable performance. And so you see them engaging in Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube would be their top 3, but not far behind. You see LinkedIn, and I think it's got a lot to do with their need for recruitment. This industry is growing extremely fast at the moment. And then you also see TikTok and Pinterest jumping up into the space. TikTok, not quite as high as your in-store, your retail markets, but still very up high there in the e-commerce space. So yeah, that gives you a bit of a breakdown of how that works in the different areas per businesses on social media. But then we wanted to get a bit of an idea of what's really important to people. And so we said, well, what happens when you decrease a budget? So we looked at all the companies whose budgets were decreasing, and then we said, well, what still stays, and what are they still prioritizing? And so what's really interesting is that companies who have decreased budgets prioritize CRM, email marketing, and social media. So if you want to know what really matters to people, take away their resource and look at what they keep. So a great way to understand my world is that if you were to basically say I could only eat so much and I eat and drink so much in the world, the things I would keep would be whiskey and chocolate. You know, it's about the resource that we really matter at the end of the day. And so when you take marketers and you say, what are the things that really matter to you? CRM, email marketing, social media, these are the things that we know how to wield, we know can add value. And if given a choice of absolutely nothing, this is what we'd want to take with us. It's really interesting to see this. And so you can't talk about marketing without talking about AI, but we wanted to try and have a bit more of a real conversation about AI. AI adoption sort of, and the AI sort of trend sort of started impacting this report as we put the research into this. And so we had some research to look back on in the previous report, but not much. And so this year, we were able to dig into it a little bit more. But the big thing here is that it's definitely rising, but it's the integration piece that lags. And so we'll dive in a little bit here. So what you'll see here is that in the top corner over here, you've got startups. So startups are really interesting as a vehicle, and we segment them out. So when you do the survey, you tell us if you're a startup, okay? Because startups are unique. They can be massively large businesses or very small one-man teams. And so if you're a startup, you get segmented straight out of this. And so startups are so unique in the sense of how they use AI. It's their primary thing that they're using AI. They want to drive a lot of automation. They want to use their business in different ways. They tend to come at things with a lot more of an innovative feel. But if you jump into smaller organizations, you see AI assistants and generative software moving a little bit further down the channel. And then medium organizations, a little bit more further down the channel in terms of adoption. Large organizations, it's hardly on the map, okay? And I think this has a lot to do with just the normal sense of change and innovation through these different size organizations. We saw the same with social media. We've seen the same with any new technology that takes place. Larger organizations have more to think about when it comes to adopting these things through their businesses. They have more to lose as well. So when you see about actively adopting these things, it takes a bit more time for them to do so. But then what we see is we see a massive ramp up much faster in their ability to integrate and to make value, to gain value out of these tool sets than the other organizations that can adopt it much faster. So when you take a look at that and then you compare it against things like the training ideas and the way in which organizations are setting their training goals, you can then see that AI, it sits again in the middle there, that AI is not really a highly prioritized training idea yet. So what the data sort of tells us is that people are starting to bring it in to their business. They're starting to see it as something I've got to bring into my marketing, but it's not something I'm actively pushing. It's not something I need to build my resource around. I'm kind of okay with the idea that I can read my little chat prompt guides and all the rest of it and get my training from there. But this idea of heavily integrating this into the way in which we market our businesses, the integration is where we lack in our businesses, especially in South Africa. And so that's I think, going to become our next big conversation, is what happens with the integration. And so in our next survey, we're unpacking the AI conversation a lot more in terms of how we're actually utilizing AI beyond just generative content and chatbots and assistants. And so MarTech is always a really big conversation. I particularly enjoy this. It's a sort of a personal thing for me, but the way in which tools drive ROI, okay, and what tools are sitting in businesses and what are they using. So we unpack this a bit more. So if you take a look here, AI drives this, okay? But what we do alongside this is we also look at things like data proficiency and the maturity levels of different organizations. And startups are so interesting. They're such an interesting beast because 57% of the startup community are data proficient to the point that they surpass small and medium organizations. They're dangerously close to the data proficiencies of large organizations. Now, to put that in perspective, these are like 100 employee plus organizations. They have resources far beyond what startups would generally work with. And so the way in which startups are able to work and move they're just completely different beasts, especially in the markets. And I think you can see that when you walk into startup communities, and you can see the way in which they talk about business versus when you say walk into like a small business conference. The conversations are so vastly different when you walk into these two different environments. Small businesses face the widest maturity gap, and so what you're looking at here is exactly that. You can see the difference in the data proficiency. So you've got 50% of the businesses in small business with almost no data maturity, and then you've got this big gap. The rest of them all come scattered between their growth on the rest of it, the 11, 21, and 14. It's very interesting conversation. So medium firms in this space have it also, and I've always found this fascinating, that it actually always looks like this, no matter how the graph always has the same curve. You have a biggish portion, roughly half of the set will sit on we have little to no data strategy. Then there'll be this middle gap that's almost, that's a very small percentage. And then you'll have, hey, we have a really strong data strategy and we don't make decisions without data. So you always have this really interesting V shape that comes out in mid-sized organizations. And I always say, like, it's really interesting, and large organizations should be very, very aware that there are a lot of mid-sized organizations that are scaling faster than they've ever had before because of the data strategy and the data connection. So they should be very aware of this, even though you're seeing, so the guys that are sitting in the larger organizations, the 5, the 19, they are actually the guys that are going to, they're going to lose the race to the mid-sized organizations in the 29 to 19s, because those are the guys that can actually dominate the markets that the larger organizations are losing to. So really interesting to see this. The other thing that's really interesting, and I'll bring this up, you'll see this becomes a bit of a theme, but mid-sized organizations that are data proficient, 63% of them are always increasing budgets. And then you see your larger organizations. So larger organizations, their tech stack, their marketing tech stack tends to dominate more in analytics, CRM, and automation. So you see a lot more of those tech stacks, and if you compare them against the others, you'll see different types of tech stacks sitting there. So they are pushing harder in this space to really understand, and because I think understanding is much harder for these larger organizations, they need to invest heavily here. There are 31% of them claim to be fully data driven, and only 5% of them lack a data strategy. So this is definitely becoming a more mature conversation in these organizations. That gives you a bit of an idea of how these different organizations work. And I want to kind of close with this this idea, and I think that this is probably the most interesting idea that's come from this research this year. And this is this, if I premise this with this thing, that digital became so interesting to us and sparked an interest in us, because when social media came around and when websites came around, we could suddenly do something that we couldn't do before, and that was we could emulate trust. We could emulate this idea that we could build trust with people through technology. And by being able to build trust with people, that means we could scale our businesses. Okay, we could scale our businesses beyond the salesperson that had to go out. We could, people would refer to it as, I could have a salesperson selling all night for me, as an example. And so the trust has always been the digital success factor. The more credibility I could create online, the more reliability I could do, the more I could create a sense of intimacy and the closeness and the better customer service I could produce in the digital space, the more business I would generate because of that trust that I have and the trusted relationship I could create. But what we found now is that there's this new success factor. Not saying that trust isn't important, it's as important as it's ever been, but there's this new word, confidence, that's starting to make its way in, and it's the confidence in which we can move in the digital space that's now going to be the difference between those who are successful and those who aren't. So yes, trust is now the status quo. You have to build trust in the digital space. That's not a question. But what's going to be the difference between those who succeed incredibly well versus those who don't are going to be those who move with confidence and those who don't. And so to put the data on the table, you can see this idea of this confidence curve and this thinking we're unpacking, but we've got this data to share with you. If you take a look at how people make decisions, and so what we've done is we've mapped the light green bars are those with no data strategy, and the brighter bars are those with data that are data driven. They have data strategies in place. And we then asked, well, how do you make decisions? what influences the decisions that you make when you're building strategy, when you're making decisions in the market. And so data-driven businesses are able to trust their decisions more on their previous experience and success. And they're able to lean into industry practices a little bit more. And they're able to trust their customer research and their feedback. Whereas non-data-driven businesses are less able to do that across those three in every case, but are actually more constrained by budget and are more constrained, are sort of need to lean on things like competitive analyses, external factors, and look at things like, look at all of these other things almost in like this at the same level. So you can see that with data-driven businesses, they lean heavily into these things where their data can really feed them, whereas non-data-driven businesses kind of go, I've got this gut feel about something, so I'm going to run with it. These are my previous experiences, and everything else is kind of flatlined, 34, 31, 30, and then a little bit of advice at 22. But the biggest thing that actually then impacts over and above that beyond gut is budget. Because if I can't validate with numbers what I actually think my gut is telling me to do, then I'm going to get hit with a budget. And I'm going to get told, this is how much money you have to spend, do the best you can with it. But if I can turn a data strategy and I've got a data-driven strategy and I can say, hey, when we spent this much money and we generated this much business out of it, and I take that to my board, I can actually now have a conversation about growth instead of a conversation about spend. And when I can do these kinds of things, we systematically, the raw data underneath this is that all of our data-driven businesses have a trend that they have increasing budgets almost year on year. So there's a confidence that comes not only with the way in which we make decisions as marketers when we are sitting in data-driven businesses, but also in the fact that we can grow. And so we actively do. And so it's a really, really interesting insight. And it's really interesting to see that a commitment to data-driven, to being data-driven, and it is a commitment. Anyone who's been down the journey of trying to turn their business into a data-driven business will know it's a commitment. It's not easy. It's a mission, but it's worth doing because it has this very strong sense of confidence that gets built in the business. And that is actually going to be our new strength as marketers going into 26, 27, 28 over the next few years, is our ability to be confidently move, because confidence means we can move well with the resource we need and we can move quickly. But even though we've got the trust of the consumer, if we are the ones that can move quickly with that trust, we will do better than those who have the trust of the consumer and can't confidently move. And so confidence becomes the new curve that we should be looking to. So that's a bit of insight into what the paper presents and a couple of the ideas that really come out. I'd encourage you to take a read through it, mainly because of what we've got, and then also what the contributors have really put in. They've really put in some valuable information. Our whole aim is always, and why we launch it in November, which is the busiest time of year for everybody in our industry, is because we're really trying to create something here that you can utilize going into 2027, into 2026 as you build strategies and align your budgets and try and figure things out going into the next part of your year. So we really hope that this has been useful and that it's been interesting and that you can actually make use of it. I do see one question that's popped up here. I'll take a quick look. Philip, I'll answer that either in the chat or at the end of the session. It's a bit more detailed to jump into right now. But yeah, thanks. Cool. I'm going to hand over to Tweni now and let her start facilitating some of the discussion from here.
Thanks, Mike, and congratulations on an amazing paper. I think, judging by all the thumbs up, everybody who has had the chance to actually look at this paper can see it's really rich, full of insights. And personally, I was scribbling furiously because we have 9 verticals in our business. We have a bank, we have an insurance company, we have a pension company, we have a tech company, like all of those, and starting to think about that V curve and looking at that and thinking, wow, fantastic insight. So thanks very much for that. Questions, you mentioned we need to move well, we need to move quickly to catch up on those that already have the trust. So, and that's going to take that confidence, which is what now defines competitiveness. In your view, what's the single biggest barrier that is standing in the way of organizations from acting with the confidence that we need to be moving with? We can't hear you, Mike.
Sorry about that. It's a combination of two things, and we see it often. And it's the first is the access to the data, and the main thing to understand about access to the data isn't that you need everything. It's just understanding what you need access to. If you kind of like reverse engineer it. If you think about what you're wanting to achieve or what you want to know about, and then how do you get that? So that's the first thing. You need the data. You need to understand how it's there. But the biggest piece that's the hardest to get right on that is the speed at which you can act on it. And that's the confidence piece, right? But the speed at which you can act on that, either whether it's automation or it's a team that can move on that data quickly, or however you can move with that data, that is the other piece that needs to come right with these things. So that's the confidence piece. You've got to feel confident about the data that you have and the access to, and then you've got to feel confident to move on it quickly. There are tactically, when you look at things like revenue operations or any of these other fields, tactically, all what they're realizing is that speed to market, speed to response, speed to meeting the demand, speed to everything, they literally are like shaving seconds off them, because they can prove numbers that saving 3 seconds on a call, keeping a client on a sales call for 5 more seconds will most likely close an extra 60% of those calls. Like these are the numbers that people know. And so when you learn how to shave these numbers and fix these numbers, like the seconds literally matter. So the speed of response, the speed at which we can do things is going to be the clincher. Yeah.
And that leads me up to the next question, which I'll address to you, Jean-Pierre, at TikTok. I mean, we talk about measurement being in flux, and on the other side, Mike is saying speed, move, go faster. In an environment where, the metrics are outdated, and perhaps marketers might be making decisions based on the wrong metrics. How do brands rebuild confidence when that data feels uncertain, when things are changing so fast? JB?
It's a good question. Thank you, Tawana. I'll start with a semi-philosophical answer, and then I'll move into probably a real-life example that many attendees on this call can identify with. But I think the semi-philosophical one is that where uncertainty is a new baseline, it's really all about us adapting quickly, right? So how quickly are we able to change our behavior, rather than taking confidence from precision that may be dated by the time of application. So I think what it means in practice is think about last click attribution, which is a measurement model that I think 90% of my customer conversations reveal to or acknowledge to be suboptimal in so many ways. And yet it's so much harder to find that better model and to institutionalize that in an organization. So keeping in mind that to a retailer, for example, a change in such a model means changes not only in their CRM, but in their cloud solutions, in the way they track SKUs. So the changes in the back end to that can be quite drastic. So what we generally encourage, and where we like to take our clients to, is speed to action, and adaptability to the many new tech innovations that we bring to the table as a platform almost daily, and so do our competitors. And with that, remove the the focus on, call it legacy metrics that may provide clarity yet false clarity. We try to discourage channel-specific vanity metrics, right? The conversation should always stay in business. So what are your true business objectives? And yes, me as TikTok, I have a role to play in contributing to, or in, trying to help you attain these business metrics, but it should never be a channel level conversation. So we try to encourage structured frameworks. Some of these we provided in our contribution to this white paper, and we're very proud of that. But generally, confidence comes from consistency, from alignment, from adaptability to new technologies, to new measurement solutions, and not from sticking to legacy models.
I think that kind of is a good segue to my question for Andrew Gillet. Talking about vanity metrics in particular, and I think you just called it false clarity, which I absolutely love as an expression, which is, like how we make our decisions. Andrew, your work shows that context is the missing ingredient to get that clarity that we've just talked about. So how can real-world context sharpen the decision-making and reduce that hesitation? Andrew?
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you, Tawini. Look, I think I'm 100% aligned with what Mike is saying and what the data is showing. So for our business, which for context is a location intelligence platform, data is effectively the fuel that powers that context. So it's probably something that's changed the most in the last 18 months. We have access to a lot of static data, but more recently, far more dynamic data, which influences the planning and the strategic ability for marketers to look at how they engage with their clients. We've been chasing our partners and the agencies to speak to the clients, to give us access to that data. And we often, I think as Mike's stats also showed, there's historically been a resistance to sharing data because it's, they think it's, going to give away, confidential information about that specific business, which actually it doesn't need to. We talk to our clients about, being able to give us rankings for stores, for a retailer, as an example, or a QSR client. I think historically, lots of clients only use context in terms of content targeting. So purely looking at where is the consumer, what are they reading, and then trying to connect with them, purely through content. Whereas I think nowadays with the dynamic data sets that we work with, we have access to mobility data. So if there's high mobility in a specific area, that can be a contextual trigger. We can obviously look at online content consumption and social media engagement. Those are kind of core tenets of what we would use. But then also things like time of day. Yesterday in Cape Town it was flipping 30 million degrees. So what does that say to an advertiser, and in terms of what they're advertising? It's a simple example, but they're not going to be advertising a warm dessert with custard. It's going to be an ice cream, that type of thing. So it's very simplistic, but it's the kind of data inputs that we have allows us to let marketers make those decisions on the fly, or set up rules that allow them to make those calls. So within our backend, we can set those rules, and nowadays we've got dynamic creative optimization. It means we can switch between creatives literally within a millisecond. So we really rely on that data, those dynamic data sets, and access to that data is critical. And that's where a lot of the conversations are happening with our clients this year, and definitely going into next year. And it goes to trust. It goes to the relationships that we've built with our agency partners and that they have with the clients. And I think obviously, secondly, once they start to see how that impacts on engagement and, as Jochen said, results, it actually has to effectively boil down to a ROAS calculation. But what it does do, it allows marketers to be far more efficient in terms of how they plan, and to then obviously drive better performance for their bottom line.
Yeah. So speaking of driving that better performance into 2026, I'd like to ask you, which one is it going to be? I've heard here the big thing I need to focus on is confidence. Someone is saying to me, nope, measurement. Someone is saying, hello, context. Which one is the one that's going to help me to make better decisions for my brands in 2026? Let's duke it out. Who's on the floor?
I think it's both. I mean, I think they go hand in hand. Jochen said it can't be one metric that drives all decisions. As I said, the more access we have to client data, the smarter we can be with the decision making. That builds confidence, and allows marketers to be far more confident in making those calls. And I think historically it's been a little bit of trial and error, and the reality is that error costs you. Error is wasted impressions ultimately. So
I would agree. I think what I could add I agree with Andrew, and our take on that is so confidence without context is, what is it? Intuition, maybe bias. So context matters a lot, right? The consumer journey is non-linear, is less and less predictable. So context matters to build confidence in a data-driven view. And without context becomes misleading. So context enables marketers to interpret signals holistically and not in isolation. So discovery playing a bigger role, or short-form video platforms playing a bigger role in discovery. I think context is what connects behaviors, cultures, businesses, brands. So I think all three matter almost equally.
Yeah. No, thanks very much for that. At the end of the day, really, ultimately, we're fighting for attention. Like we're saying, the ice cream idea, we're fighting for attention, and we need to make those decisions in a split second. I'd like to ask you, Andrew, when attention spikes when brands align with the right moment. So you gave an example of ice cream on a hot day in the 29 million degree Cape Town. So is timing now important than message, do you think? And also, I mean, yeah.
Well, I just want to contextualize my answer, but in my career, I started out working in a creative agency as a suit, and I have a great appreciation for the power of a great idea. I've presented them, I've sold them, and I've been involved in campaigns that have become iconic just purely because of the concept. So Tiffany and the other copywriters, I have a huge appreciation for the work that creatives do. Unfortunately, I'm not in that space. Well, I miss it. I miss that dynamic edge that the creative process brings to any business, and what it can do for a brand. So just to contextualize my answer, I think obviously delivering that message at the right time is obviously critical as well. So it's about, the data can deliver you a brilliant audience. It can find you that audience in the right place at the right time. But ultimately, you need really good creative work. And our personal opinion, I think that it's, in the digital age, I think we've lost a little bit of a creative edge sometimes. I just look at some of the campaigns that we ran with. It's become a little bit transactional, and I don't know if that's maybe because it's a more e-commerce driven environment potentially. It's a personal opinion, but again, they go hand in hand, because I think nothing beats the impact that a great idea, will deliver. People will actively engage with a campaign if it's fun, it's entertaining, and you feel like it's, for me.
Yeah, it has been fun, entertaining, and human. And so, Tiffany, then you have been mentioned here and called to the front of the class. Would you say that imperfection grabs attention because it feels human? I think the raw edge and the touch that Andrew is talking about that sometimes feels it's becoming more transactional. What are your thoughts on that?
So I absolutely agree. I would even say that imperfection is strategic, or should be. It's almost necessary strategy, I think, as we're moving into 2026, because the digital world, as my fellows have said, is drowning in same content. And when everybody's producing stuff that is not dissimilar, nothing resonates. And I call that beige mush in the paper inside the Insight report. It's largely invisible. So because things that are perfectly polished smell manufactured, the consumer or the audience becomes not suspicious, but just dubious. And so the minute you factor in imperfection, and I don't mean chaos, I mean vulnerable, human, flawed, authentic, raw stuff, the minute you factor that in, those dents that are used deliberately create more trust. The only caveat is, of course, if you're going to do that, you have to use a lot of commitment and a lot of care, because chaos without care is noisy and can affect creativity down the line. But yeah, the short answer is that imperfection does grab attention because it feels human.
Feels human. Yes, absolutely. In the paper, Bronwyn, moving over to you, your work suggests that brands actually no longer control culture, and that consumers do. I think, which ties in nicely with what Tiffany has just shared, that human elements, like we still matter, guys. Let's not fear. So, Bronwyn, would you say that attention has now become something that brands must earn from audiences rather than command? We used to be quite didactic and broadcast oriented. What are your thoughts on that?
I think my message is even scarier than that. I think what's catching up with the brand, commerce, retail side of the economy, the good side of the economy, is something that's already very prevalent in the monetary side of the economy. And that is the shift from active to passive, right? I mean, if we look at how investments are managed, who outperforms the market in a financial sense. Fund managers for a very long time thought, if they were active managers, they could be rock stars and heroes in the Warren Buffets of the world, to be but silly there. But that doesn't play out. Like, the data now shows that passively managed funds outperform actively managed funds over time. And sometimes the active managers get lucky. But if you look at the whole, then that's not the case. It's not a case of talent. It's a case of actually the system is beating the market. And what we're seeing now is this shift moving over into the good side of the economy, which is the space where most of you are playing: brand, retail, communication, where we have this idea that the active brand can still lead culture, can still lead the conversation, that creativity can cut through the clutter. And that worked in the big media age, but we're now in the agentic era of commerce. We're now in the era of bots, not just used for conversation or companionship, but increasingly used for purchase and used for large-scale purchase, from small decisions right through to big decisions. The dismediation of decision-making is really here. It's here right now, and brands need to understand that. Listening to this conversation here, everyone else talking about how, of course, you need the better data faster so you can make better decisions. But I think that's still perhaps a slight challenge you're going to have to deal with going forward. And that is that making the decision, however fast you're making it, you're going to lose out on the mass side of the market. Now, of course, there's still opportunities in niche. There's still opportunities offline, but it's much smaller scale. This idea of big brands make decisions faster just doesn't work in the sort of cybernetic commerce space, where really, if you want to own market share using the channels we're talking about here, which are digital channels, this is the market space we're talking about, social, online, all the rest of it. You're playing in this agentic cybernetic economy, which I wrote about in paper, and it's essentially this thing that demand can be harvested and fed back to the consumer without a brand in the loop. Your brand identity is part of the machine that can be absorbed by a manufacturer who can deliver based on consumers' real-time demand in an infinite, seamless loop. And to cut through that in these channels is not going to be something you can win with throwing more money at the problem, when effectively what is happening is a dismediation of brand from the retailer, manufacturer, brand kind of or consumer cycle. And this is what is happening. It's not like a comfortable message. And again, it's not to say there's not a space for all of this industry and for brands, but that space in the globalized, digitized economy is going to require an entirely new way of working, a way of working that just bigger data, faster analytics, that still require a human in the loop. Active brand and communication management is simply not going to scale as it used to, which is going to require a whole new set of tactics as to how to survive. That means playing a different game, not playing games that you sort of setting yourself up to lose, or re-engineering your business to become a passive business, much like the financial industry, which is larger than the goods industry at the moment, has already re-engineered itself to do, right? So again, there's kind of like bifurcation of choosing, are you going to be an active or a passive business and brand? And there's a very different rule book that you have to follow going forward. The playbook that worked in the early days of social media, now we are in the age of not social media, but parasocial media. And that's a very, very different space to play. And are you going to be cybernetic? Are you going to be not anticipating demand, but actually responding and reacting to it, building a system to deliver what people want as they imagine it at that particular moment? We think Checker 6060 is at the sort of fast end of commerce. We ain't seen nothing yet when you're sort of plugging in global supply chains to immediate generative ideation. Whole different game we're looking at there. Or are you going to take a different tack, forget about playing this sort of passive game and go fully active? And that's going to mean disconnecting a lot of what we have been trying to build in terms of the social internet, which is just not going to be there within the next sort of 12 to 18 months as we know it. So hopefully that's a little bit scary, but if you read the article, there are sort of some things that we can do, being human, connecting, but it's also a different question of scale. And the ambitions around scale are going to have to sort of match with the business model and way of dealing with this evolution into parasocial kind of internet era that you'll have to sort of choose how to build your business going forward.
Yeah. So yes, you did manage to scare me. I want to take my ball and go home and hide and not play anymore. But on the other side, when you talked about the Checker 6060 idea, I started thinking, hang on, there is hope because they are in that, I think you've called it the generative ideation, that cybernetic space, moving very quickly. But at the same time, it's quite a strong, you know what to expect.
This is like when 6060 says they don't have the product, but you can choose an alternative. So.
If she's in the chat.
I was really waiting for the end of that sentence. I feel a bit like this is a drum roll.
Can we rewind?
Way to create anticipation. So any.
There we go. And hold. Oh. Oh, it probably just hung. It hasn't even disconnected.
I have to confess, Bronwyn, that in the gap, I was Googling the difference between parasocial media and social media. And I get it. My daughter talks about it all the time. She says it's when people in a fandom feel like they know the characters in the TV show, but they've got no relationship with them whatsoever. So I can't wait to tell her that you were talking about it. on the panel today.
You've got a jargon you can all drop and take forward.
Love it. It's going to make me sound so on top of everything. I can't wait.
So
when he's back.
Am I back? I didn't even know I'd been kicked out. I'm like, why are they not talking to me? Did I say something wrong?
No, we were all waiting for the end of your sentence desperately.
Okay, so the end of the sentence, the beginning of which I can't remember, essentially what I was asking was, what is going to win attention then in this space? Is it going to be timing? Is it going to be tone? Is it going to be cultural relevance? What do you think, Tiffany?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yes, I'm asking everybody.
I think it's going to be, look, it's very, very hard to not to oversimplify the answer to that question. If you're asking, I think, and we'll all give totally different answers, but I think if you're asking me, it's, and it does sound very, very grade one when I say it's humanity, and humanity in an authentic way. Some things deserve to exist, not just because they have a job to perform, but because humans need them in order to make buying decisions. Some things should exist just to be interesting and connect, not necessarily always to convert or educate or inspire. And obviously I'm answering from a very content heavy point of view. I'm going to flip it over to Bronwyn.
Wow.
I think there's a sort of idea that in order to sort of survive this machine kind of era that we're in, the cybernetic commerce, all the rest of it, you have to understand you have to choose what is inside the machine, what is outside the machine, right? And that means protecting some things actually from mass consumption, because as soon as it's mass consumption, it becomes commodified, it becomes dupable, and your customers don't care about the dupe, they care about the value. So there's a couple of ways to look at this. One is, of course, saying, what are you withholding from the machine? What is outside of the curve? I mean, I do this with corporates all the time, like figuring out like what's your actual value proposition. As soon as it's part of the algorithmic soup, it is no longer a competitive advantage. It is just the new baseline, right? So if it's in the soup, if you put the ingredient in the soup, it's now public domain, and that means it's no longer defendable. What do you keep out the soup? What's your sort of secret there? And then also focusing ultimately on what's the actual value you're delivering. And this again is a very unfair message for brands, because like I did marketing back in the day when I was very young and I studied, and they told you the whole point of a brand is to essentially extract a price premium from the marketplace, right? It's to extract value, not to add value. The brand itself is there to differentiate a commodity without actually improving the underlying value of the commodity. So it's signaling, right? And signaling, much like in the job market at the moment, like we know degrees are losing their value, their return on investment. As if you're a graduate now, you're not going to get the same return on investment as your degree before, because the degree is not actually your value. It is a signal of the value that you have. And brands are going to have to figure this out too, just like employees, that what's the actual underlying value that you're bringing. So this is again focusing on quality, the underlying product. It no longer becomes just a communications challenge, because yes, the communications piece, Tiffany is there and can sell that pig by putting lipstick on it, but ultimately the pig itself is becoming more important than the lipstick in this sort of environment. So Tiffany can have the best copy possible, but it's not going to matter if ultimately what you're delivering isn't actually delivering real value, not just brand value, but real value. And sort of separating that conversation becomes more critical. And I think that's actually quite a good thing. It's a good thing for the market in general, for humanity in general, that value and messaging and signaling is losing its value at the same time that reality is the place where you can really defend your competitive advantage. I'm not sure that's the answer that you wanted, but if you're really about value, just keep it up. Keep it out the soup, and no one will hear it.
So
I like. Yes.
I just wanted to add, so something that resonates for me is the humanity or the cultural aspect. You know, something that fascinates me, just because I've always done like cycling and running and whatever, but these running clubs and that whole culture that has grown massively. I mean, and I just look at the prom in Cape Town, and just all the running clubs that are on the streets all the time. Is born out of a humanity or a humanitarian need to connect, to stay fit. In a lot of cases, apparently to date, which is, I suppose, is connecting. But you look at how that trend, which you could argue has almost was born, post COVID, but how that's impacted the market. So how has that impacted running shoe brands, and all the accessories that everyone, the 9 million inch sunglasses that they wear, the running packs, the shoes and the different shoes you've got to have. It's fascinating, but it's for me, it's a great example where, that cultural need has driven a market or a change in markets. And how do we react to that? Like, I think as Bronwyn says, it's understanding how that impacts a brand, and how do you then build your, are you involved in it, or are you passive as something that's not involved with. So that for me is a very interesting space, but driven out of a human need ultimately.
Yeah, I think that leads us.
Adidas is doing so well in that space.
Who's that? JP?
I was just saying Adidas is doing so well in that space.
Adidas. Okay.
Yeah, Adidas.
Adidas. Okay. So what you talked about now, it speaks to, I guess, the third theme here, which is about reality versus synthetic futures. We're talking about, we are all campaigning for the human to win in this, because it still feels very much this versus that. It's not feeling integrated yet. It feels like we're still in the fight, and I think it's because we are. I want to move to this next section. JP, your contribution is around AR, VR, MR not solving real SA problems yet. And again, I think that also speaks to you kind of appealing for the human to win the fight. Can you just, if you're arguing that there are remaining luxury technologies in SA at the moment, what do you think needs to change for that immersive tech to create a real economic value, which is so desperately needed in SA?
Well, thank you. I'm learning so much from everyone today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I think AR, VR, and MR may have been at the bottom of the list. No one else picked it, and they said, let's give it to JP. And then JP had to put something together about that. And I know one of the prep questions that I got here is, what must change for immersive tech to create real value? And my answer was quite concise. I think the tech is fine. It's the price that is really bad, and that South Africans are broke. We can't afford these things. There was an item, you can Google it. It's in the article. It runs into tens of thousands of rands for this thing you put on your face just to see something that's not even in front of you. So, to answer that question, which was on the prep sheet, I think that we need to reduce the price, and we need our economy to be doing better, and then there'll be a bigger uptake. But while I was listening to everyone talking, there was another idea which jumped into my head. Can I just quickly share that? I've written so many notes here. I've written a whole book listening to you.
Go for it.
I think some context is quite important. In South Africa, we've only got about 3 million businesses, and I think Bronwyn mentioned now about the size of the digital economy, and it's growing. But in South Africa and Africa, it's 1/10 of the economy. It's tiny, it's minute, and the people who are sitting in this room today, or the ones that I can see anyway, I suspect you all play in the market of the bigger businesses. And bigger businesses in South Africa, there's just over 2,000 of them. Medium-sized enterprises, there's about 40,000, and in tiny businesses, that's under 50 people, that's sitting at 2.5 million. And we haven't even touched on the informal economy here. And I think that's really the biggest nugget I'd like to chew on today, is that I think technology, whatever technology we use, be it VR, AR, or whatever we're doing, social media, it's meant to help. I hate technology being used just for the sake of technology being used. And there's this wonderful opportunity for us to uplift South Africa using technology. And I'm not sure if we're making it accessible enough. And I think what's really missing is tutoring and sharing helpful information. I can't see who's sitting in on this room today, but I doubt there's anyone from an informal settlement here. Everyone's got their cell phone, and you can run your whole business on a cell phone nowadays, but they don't know that. They're just consuming entertainment and making lots of money for Vodacom. I hope Vodacom's not on here today. But yeah, I'd like to see that digital divide, the businesses that are involved with providing technology to really become catalysts for change. As for VR and AR, as I said, I think it will become more popular once it's priced for the South African market, and then businesses will naturally take it up. But right now, it's a luxury.
It's a luxury. I think you're completely right. I think everybody here will not be able to fight that data you just provided in terms of what the business landscape looks like and the uptake, and therefore the impact of those technologies. Bronwyn, your hyperbrand argument in the paper shows that generative tech is eroding brand control. We spoke a little bit about this a bit earlier. Do you believe that these immersive technologies are going to accelerate this erosion further, as much as the threat at this point, according to JP, is a 1% threat?
Yeah, I do think so. I also completely agree with Jean-Pierre over there with regards to the disconnect between our digital and our economy. And actually, this reinforces the point I was making earlier about what we keep out of the soup. From an economist and a futurist perspective, I have such alarm bells going off when I hear brands and fintechs wanting to digitize our informal economy, because what I hear is they want to put it into the soup, right? And at the moment, our informal economy is not branded. That is the whole point. I mean, if you read Gigi Alcock's work, if you listen to the interviews I've been doing on BizTrains TV, it's not branded. It is based on serving real need with good value. And by adding brand to that, you're adding cost and you're effectively extracting toll from that. So I mean, like, I have philosophical and economic sort of issues on that, but sort of coming back to the point around the immersive point. The immersive point is already here, but not in the way we think. We thought about metaverse as being goggles and fancy hardware and technology like that, which is inaccessible and it's undesirable. It makes people literally sick. I mean, like, nobody really wants to wear the sort of totally immersive thing. It makes us nauseous and all the rest of it, because we human beings and our brains are a bit more complex than that. But I'm now going to meetings in Johannesburg with people from your industry mainly, and the ones who wear the blue puffer vests that like investing. They're wearing their Meta smart glasses. Like, it's here, but it's not the way you thought about it. It's the surveillance tech that feels more invisible, and the generative components in terms of generative AI, which is becoming more accessible. I know it's not accessible here yet. You still have to pay those subscriptions, which are like more expensive than your Netflix subscription, which who can afford in this country to play with your generative technologies. But India has now got free generative AI bots for the entire population. I'm pretty sure the big tech companies will be very keen to get us connected to that pretty soon too. And you don't need that smartphone. We know we've got smartphone penetration in South Africa, way above our pay grades. We know we have the devices. We're not talking about all the fancy bits, but talking about the ability to generate words and pictures based on your ideas. That's right within our reach. Maybe not this year, but within 2 or 3 years, certainly by the end of the decade, generative technology, the words and pictures that we're seeing right now will be accessible to everyone. The costs are coming down. We know that the big tech companies aren't making any money off the subscriptions. They're going to look at their advertising model the same way the social ones, that eventually it will become accessible for everyone. That's going to happen. And the digitization of our economy is also being pushed dramatically by our governments. If you look at the Digital RAN projects, if you look at the pushes to digitize the taxi industry, they want us in the soup, okay? So everyone's going to get in the soup. Maybe there'll be some resistance. Maybe some of the poorer areas will take a bit longer, but we are headed towards the soup. So it is time to start preparing now for what we want to keep up, what we want to protect, and how we're going to play once we get to that space. Because with this soup, of course, it's global. We're not competing with South Africans. We're competing with everyone else. We're not even dealing with local manufacturers. We're dealing with foreign manufacturers who can manufacture faster and ship it to your door faster than the South African guy can get out of bed and get it from the farm that he has on the corner of your very own street. We're going to be playing in that space. And in terms of like how brands are losing sort of dominance there and they place in that ecosystem, is exactly that. If I can go from dreaming of something, like I'm a girl, say it's like matric dance season, I want this particular dress, I imagine it, I talk to my generative bot, it designs it, And immediately I can plug that design that I've just prompted into existence into a supply chain that can deliver it to my door from a Chinese manufacturer that will take care of all the shipping, logistics, and taxes and get it 24 hours. Like, where does brand come into that? If demand is coming and fulfillment is coming directly from mind all the way through machine and right back to your door. So the question then is, there's kind of two ways to look at it. The one is brand tries to be tastemaker, but that's very much like a sort of rock star thing, right? Like, everyone wants to be a celebrity. Every brand wants to lead culture. Can you really do that at scale? Maybe not, but you can probably do it within a niche. So that's where the opportunities start being, right? We spoke about like the running clubs. The opportunity there is to sell runner to runner, not to sell runner via TikTok, via whatever, via communication back to the next guy. It becomes more visceral and more immediate. So the question becomes, how do brands facilitate demand fulfillment rather than how do brands kind of restrict it? Because that's by definition what most brands are. A brand is supposed to be a restriction. It's supposed to make it more exclusive, to make it more expensive, to add status, you know. So how do you kind of move beyond that? So lots of different ways to look at it, but essentially that's kind of the landscape that we're looking at. Yes, things are getting more generative. Yes, things are becoming more digital. That's not going to be avoided. We're going to have to figure out how to operate in that space. And the role of brand is control rather than the role of brand as connection and community is probably one of the big shifts there to tie a lot of the stuff we've been saying together. Previously, what you were taught in marketing school, what brand managers do in the business is control the brand, right? Control who has access, what the price is. And by definition, you kind of control who is not part of your community, right? So you control IP, you control the color, you control the logo. But increasingly, you don't have control over that. The other thing with the generative global digital soup is that copyright is a joke. I mean, like, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's not really defensible in the real world. It's kind of defensible in theory. So how does your brand then have value? Well, the value becomes much more intrinsic than extrinsic. And that, of course, is how does the brand become a convener of its own community? I know community is a very hackneyed word, but essentially, how does the brand become a convener of connecting people with ideas together and find a new role for brand as an intermediary, right? Rather than brand as a controller. So that's a shift that's going to take some time to play out, but you're already starting to see this with the artists that release some of their tracks that their communities can remix, or with the fashion brands that allow the kids, like my kids crazy about Roblox, to experiment with their brand, like IP kits, to build their own collections, to go and, you know, model and all the rest of it. But it's a case of how does that role actually shift? And the role from control to convening is probably something that we'll have to look at to defend some sort of value proposition in a market that is not very friendly to value extraction, that is wanting value to be shared.
No, completely. No, thanks for that. But I think that there's definitely a lot of work to be done, because you can convene. The reason community forms around values. That's what community forms around. Community does
values,
sometimes.
Not values.
Around values, and that is where the brand still has relevance. I believe that's where brand still has relevance, because you can have a set of, you know, it's in your manufacturing process, your sourcing idea, or, you know, all those things. And if you have that authenticity and that humanity, I think Tiffany called it, still rooted in your brand, potentially you can convene around those values and retain the ability to differentiate in the marketplace, potentially. Mike, I just want to ask before I move to the next session, because we are now at a quarter past, where deadline, so I don't want to hold people too long in case you have other engagements. Can you give some guidance there on, do we proceed? Or?
Looks like people are hanging on. If everyone is happy to go on, I think we've probably got another 5-10 minutes or so. I know that I've got an interview about this paper, and it's 12:30 with RSG. We'll probably have to wrap up.
Sure we can squeeze it. This is the last round where we talk about the future of successful brands, some of which we've already started speaking about. The speakers have started speaking about. So if we just keep our maybe responses a bit more succinct, so we can hear. I'd like to really go around the room and hear a bit more from everybody. If you had to pick one force that would define successful brands in 2026 and beyond, What is it from all that we've discussed? And I like Bronwyn's word, from the soup, what are we fishing out? Is it confidence? Is it adaptability? Real world context is something we talked about. Authenticity, human storytelling, cultural relevance, creative bravery, measurement maturity, technological integration. What's it going to be? And to try not to defend your corner, because that's what you do. Out of those, what do we think, what if we were to go, like, okay, for me, as a marketing person with 9 brands that I need to now go back from this talk and say, all right, oh my God, I heard so much. Where do I start? What do we think is the most important?
I'll go. I'm not going to defend my corner, even though my oh yeah, I think I just jumped in, did I? I think I pipped you. Sorry, JP. I'll keep it super tight. So I'm not going to defend my corner by talking about content. First. Thank you. I'm not going to defend my corner by talking about content, because I think that's an obvious answer. What I am going to do is I'm going to overstep into somebody else's corner and say the one thing that we can't afford to have is shitty data. Because bad data kills brands fast. Bad content, which is the area that, thank God, I play in fixing it, is forgivable. Okay, it's forgivable. Bad timing is unavoidable, but bad data is disastrous. And when organizations lack the confidence that comes from substantial evidence, their strategies become defensive and everything's a big disaster. End of. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
What she said.
Stick that on a t-shirt. Amazing. Love it. JP, what do you think?
I just wanted to say cultural relevance and storytelling. I think the biggest brand that people perhaps don't know about today, because she was doing television shows when I wasn't even born, is Dr. Ninga Machlope from KwaZulu-Natal, one of the storytellers. And she's being picked up by all the big corporates, I mean, major banks, and being used. And the power of storytelling is just, it's tops for me.
Yeah, fantastic. Johan? You're the king of storytelling in short form. What do you think?
Yeah, storytelling is a superpower, not only to companies, but also to us as business leaders. So my head was in the adaptability corner. I think it's the brands are going to win, that are the first ones to respond, that want to be the first ones to win the race. So there's a bit of a hunger and who wants to win the race component to it. And the reason why I say that is I often in South Africa, I get asked, what can we learn from global brands? What can we learn, I don't know, from the global retail landscape, from global consumer brands, et cetera, et cetera. And generally my answer is, yes, there are a few things that we can learn, best practices in marketing, but it's genuinely a very cohesive landscape in product and tech opportunity that is in front of a Chinese retailer as it is in front of a South African retailer. It's simply about the speed to adoption and the adaptability to embrace such technologies. So I think that's what will shape a successful brand in 2026 and beyond. Who wants to win the race and who's most hungry to embrace new technologies?
Fantastic. Mike, do you want to chip in on that one?
Everybody's saying what I could say. I think if I would just make it a bit practical, it's not about the data, but it's about being able to act on the data, which is just a dumb way of saying it's adaptability and it's data and it's all that sort of stuff. But acting on the data is more important right now. That's what gives you the speed to market.
Yeah. So we've spoken about some really great ideas that I've picked up here on the things that we need to do going into 2026. Please, cautionary tales. What's the one thing I must stop doing immediately? What's the one thing that I must stop doing immediately in marketing, looking at the digital landscape? What must you stop? TikTok, save me. What am I doing wrong? What must I stop?
Huge, big content plans with no media spend.
Oh, yes. Rah, what you said.
Sorry, I'm just going to call my boss quickly to come on the call. if you don't mind, I just want to call my MD. That is fantastic. Next, Andrew, what do you think? What's the thing I need to avoid going to 2026 so I can win?
Look, I'm a bit biased because I sit on the media side, so we always chasing budgets.
Yeah.
So it worried me that if clients have budget cuts, they spend it on CRM. I mean, I get the importance of it, but I think I love the idea of brands being more intentional around their brand promise and how do they keep that current based on cultural needs and as Bronwyn said, like a market that is buying based on purely on need.
Yeah. But that's Jochen.
I'll stick to my earlier theme, last click attribution, that needs to go. There's an overstate or a large share of media spend generates zero incremental sales, but it's not being reported on. So that is one thing that I would recommend to stop doing. And I'm very much in Mike's camp. Yes, the best content in the world is not worth a whole lot if we don't get the right amount of eyeballs on it. So echoing Mike's statement there as well.
Yeah.
On that note, can I add a epilogue, prologue, whichever one comes after? We've got to stop with the muddled propositions.
Yeah.
We've got to stop forcing customers to decode what is being sold and why it matters. They're not concentrating that hard. We need to clarify the offer. Like, who is it for? What does it do? Why is it better? Let's stop bullshitting the market and start clarifying the value props and not expecting the customer to do all the work.
To do all that work, double entendres everywhere and long sentences. And what is the value proposition, for heaven's sake? Absolutely buy that. We talked about budget here, which is, of course, the one thing that we all like. We need more money to make it happen. If you had to double the brand's digital performance, and people have said, nope, can't have more money, this is all the money you get, what lever would you pull? What's the lever I can pull if I can't sell this back when I leave this call? What's the one thing I can do right now while I get them to see sense?
I can give that a stab very briefly. We label that brand performance or full funnel marketing. So with the same amount of budget, we have clear evidence that adding an equity building component to what is often labeled performance marketing, so addressing lower funnel objectives, drives incremental sales at the same budget.
Yeah, we do the same.
You do the same.
Yeah, you can change the foundation of how you work, do that work, show the value, and then you build. Yeah. It won't have the same impact that you're selling, but you will see the trend.
The one tool or the one technology that, if everything disappears, the one that you will take into the future, one technology or one tool, that's an absolute, if you don't have this, shut shop.
A pencil with an eraser on the end.
Come on, honey. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. I mean,
they can even write in space. Yeah.
They take the space, exactly. Okay, that's fantastic. Bronwyn, what's your...
That's the thing. Make sure it's not just one. If it all comes down to one that you can't live with, you got a problem.
Then you're stuffed, yeah.
Make sure that's not the case.
It's a trick question. It's a trick question because everything needs everything else.
Everything needs everything else.
Pencil, you can write on the walls.
You still need more than one pencil.
I would do.
JP, what's yours?
I think I'd get one of those little mobile lights which you can charge in the sun. So you can, that's all I'll take.
I like. And finally, perfection or speed? What's going to help me win in 2026?
Speed. Perfection is a myth.
Iteration over perfection.
Yeah.
Minimum viable product and go.
Yeah. Done is better than perfect. Ship it 30%.
Ship it.
Yeah. Oh, ship it. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We've got 3 minutes to go. I'd just like to really take this opportunity to just thank everybody once again, the fantastic panel we've been speaking to today. Mike Saunders, CEO of Digitlab, Bronwyn Williams, futurist trend analyst, global keynote speaker, consultant, JP, future thinker, business and environmental technologist, published author, Tiffany Markman, award-winning copywriter and keynote speaker, Andrew Gillette, commercial director, and Jochen Bischoff, head of global business solutions for Africa at TikTok. And I would also like to say thank you to everybody who has attended this webinar. Thanks for all the comments and the questions that I've seen popping up in the chat, some of them being answered, and a great healthy conversation on the chat there. Those who are asking for the report, I think it's been put. I think I saw you, Mike, pop it in the chat. So please feel free to click on that, download it. It is rich. It's 86 pages of amazing insights provided by our panelists, and just really, I think for me, the cheat code for 2026. I will be poring over it studiously, and I'm going to be looking very smart at work, because I'm just going to be dropping all these into my conversation. I say, you know, as the head of TikTok said the other day on the call. So everybody for making us all that much smarter this morning. Mike, congratulations on a fantastic piece of work, and wishing everybody all the very best. And here's to great success in digital marketing in 2026.
Congratulations, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers,
Thank you so much, everyone.
Cheers.
Oh my gosh.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.